so hot.
Hot, isn't it? Be up to 27.1.
26.3.
I'm winning.
Yeah.
Don't
I'm going to
worry.
open the window now, though.
So Apple have let the cat out of the bag. Huge news this week. I could not believe what I was seeing, reading. It was absolutely crazy. AI doesn't think. This is staggering, absolutely staggering. But not for the reason everybody thinks. We knew this. We knew this was a thing. What did you make of this? Did you come across the furore on the internet?
Yeah, I kind of ignored it. I probably shouldn't have ignored it, but I kind of ignored it. So they published this paper called "The Illusion of Thinking: Understanding the Strengths and Limitations of Reasoning Models via the Lens of Complexity," something like that. And this paper, it said a bunch of stuff which was kind of interesting, which wasn't new, but everyone jumped on it, and you had people kind of both ends of the spectrum. So it basically said that we've done a bunch of research and we've concluded that those LLMs that don't have the thinking, just the vanilla ones, they're actually better at some kind of low complexity tasks. And the medium complexity tasks, thinking LLMs do demonstrate some kind of advantage, but at the high complexity tasks, which, all of the providers have been saying, these can answer PhD questions and do this and do that. At the high complexity tasks that they've been benchmarking on, they're actually saying these thinking LLMs don't really offer any advantage. And in fact, they collapse under the weight of complexity and they become useless and they don't think. Okay. And so that kind of got everyone sort of scratching their heads because you've got to put it in context, right? Apple... it does sound a bit like sour grapes because Google have come out with this amazing kind of AI platform, OpenAI, new company, newish company, come out and taking the world by storm. Microsoft obviously doing their own thing off the back of the investment in OpenAI, but now they're building their own models. And then there's Apple that said, Apple Intelligence, we're doing this, but we're doing it better because we're doing it Apple, and we're going to make sure it's super secure and it's going to be on device and it's going to be amazing. And they made this thing, didn't they, last year's WWDC, I think. And this year they're like, no, still haven't got it. But it's because we want to make it Apple and we want to make it brilliant and it's going to be ready and it's going to be amazing, but it's not coming. And we're not going to give you any dates because we don't want to let you down again. And so it does sound like when they come out with this paper, which went viral, by the way, everyone started talking about it. It does sound a bit like sour grapes, and it also kind of misses the point.
I didn't read the paper, right? I saw the headlines and I saw some of the noise about it. And you've actually you've added a bit of nuance to it that I didn't even know was there, right? So you're suggesting that they are saying that people have missed the point about what models are good for what. That's interesting. What most people seem to have picked up on is this idea that LLMs are nothing more than prediction modules, prediction engines. And I'm like, well, duh, didn't we know that? And that's all everyone is focused on. Like, what do you mean it's not a super intelligent brain that can create new things out of thin air and, it's one step away from the singularity? Like, it felt like everyone was focusing very much on that part, and the idea that then they're just a very good prediction engine.
It's
is all they're focused on.
And they said stuff that everybody knows. All the researchers know this. So they say stuff in this paper like, we found that they really struggle with exact computation where they failed to use explicit algorithms and just call back to probability. And it's like, well, that's why when you ask it to pick a number between 1 and 20, it picks 17. That's why we did the whole work paper. There's the thing, it's because it uses statistical analysis. But the thing is, there's all kinds of research going on at the moment, which we've talked about on here before. Neurosymbolic reasoning engines, that's a big kind of push in the research space at the moment to try and get these LLMs operating in two modes. One where they fall back or fault to this statistical probability. We've talked like humans are analogy engines. LLMs operate at the moment best as analogy engines. They draw on a whole bunch of previous learned data, they spot patterns, and they use that to put together plausible outputs. But there's this understanding that they need to operate in this other mode too, where they fall back to formal methods. If you're doing maths, then there is an element of formal reasoning. And interestingly, a lot of these LLMs do already have that in there. They just don't switch between the two modes that well, and the more formal stuff is quite underdeveloped at the moment. So yeah, Apple said something that wasn't surprising really to anybody that's kind of in this space, and it did sound like sour grapes, because what are Apple suggesting? They're suggesting that actually we believe small language models that you can fit on a device where you don't need these massive cloud providers are the way forward. And then they bring out a paper that justifies why we might be going down the wrong path. I also think that it misses the point in how this whole space is evolving. So the industry is going in this agentic direction.
Mm-hmm.
Which means that if this paper is suggesting they collapse with high complexity tasks, but they perform really well with medium complexity tasks, well, that's exactly what agents and agentic frameworks are trying to harness. You split these complex tasks up into lots of small tasks that are handled by multiple different agents that are specialists at particular tasks. The smaller you make those tasks, the better they are at executing them. And actually, if you get down to a certain level, then you don't need the thinking stuff at all. Really, it doesn't necessarily benefit from the more bigger and more complex models. And then you stitch these things together, you orchestrate them such that they're working together to produce a result. So a lot of the complaints I think in this paper are pretty much already a moot point, because we're now developing agentic systems that use an LLM under the hood, a bit like kind of an operating system, but you've abstracted that into little some personalities that are working together to achieve common goals. No nod to that really in that paper either.
No, and I think that's really what got me thinking, and what triggered for me was the surprise that people expressed around what Apple was saying was basically focused on the things that we all think is obvious and basically self-evident. Like, as you said, if you know anything about this stuff, you knew that LLMs were good at prediction, and they weren't, good at other things. They're very good at it, and it's very, very useful. But that's fundamentally what they were. But people were expressing surprise and consternation about this new fact. That was the bubble that Apple was bursting. And it made me wonder, or just think about how just careful we need to be, I guess, about the assumptions that we make around how people understand the words, the terms, the technology, the language that we use. So, I mean, you just mentioned there agentic, for example, and how many conversations have you been in the last few weeks, months, where people are interchangeably using the term AI, agentic, agent, throwing these things around as if they all mean the same thing, bot, all these kind of things. Actually, they're very specific. We mean specific things by what we say to them and when we're talking about it, and they've got specific use cases and specific roles. But I don't think that's really all that clear in kind of the wider ecosystem.
Yeah, it's that thing, isn't it, of just trying to not live in your bubble and understand what's actually what level the rest of the world is at. I mean, Apple's obviously banking on them being pretty far behind by the.
I'm loving your cynicism. Your cynicism that basically Apple wrote a paper to back up what the product was they're about to release.
I mean, I don't know.
There might be something in it.
I want to be fair to them. So they have got a research team that are that have been pumping out a few papers on LLMs and on AI and Gen AI in particular. We know that the Apple Intelligence is coming. They've got something working on campus right now, and that paper wasn't entirely, rubbish. It was kind of interesting it was saying, look, the current method of just scaling this thing using more and more tokens and more compute to do more and more thinking, which is the what we get release after release, is not going to work, because it doesn't necessarily mean that just because you give it more thinking time, you're going to get a better result. Actually, there's a point where you give it more thinking time and you get a worse result. So that's what it was kind of drawing into the public domain, I suppose, and highlighting. I don't think that was unknown, to the people in the know either. And there's lots of stuff when someone like OpenAI releases a new model, and there's lots of tuning that they're doing underneath to get the balance right with how it's thinking, when it's reasoning, when it's switching to modes, how it's using tools. And that's why you're seeing, I think, a lot of these models going agentic, right? The new O models, as we talked about again previously, are pretty much fully agentic. They're using lots of tools and relying on lots of different modes to try and get you the best answer.
It's really fascinating though, I guess the public opinion on Apple at the moment within the industry and beyond, it has shifted. Like, the shine has come off. Now, our immediate response is, as we've just said, it's like cynical. Really, is like what's going on underneath it. They've missed various jumps in this AI journey. And one of the other really baffling to me decisions that they made and was announced at WWDC this year was this move to what they're doing to the iPad OS in OS 26, I think. So they've shifted it now to names around years. That's fine. That makes sense. Um, but feels like a very strange backward step for the iPad. So if you imagine if you cast your mind back, right, what Apple was really all about. So we're thinking around the time that Steve Jobs turns up, right? And who was the guy that he inherited it from? I always forget his name. But they were basically working on this concept that they wanted computers to be specialist devices that did stuff and did stuff really, really well. And this was in the era of the command line, and and we're moving to the GUI, and the GUI was on Windows and Macintosh. But the dream was it was really easy for anyone to use, pick it up, get your job done, don't get lost in menus, don't get lost in commands, didn't need any training. You could just interact with the device. And their pinnacle of this was one device for every task. That's basically what they wanted. They wanted a specialist device that did one thing and did it really, really well. Now that was completely impractical, and it couldn't be done. But when the touchscreens sort of came along, and we had the iPhone and later the iPad, it started to crystallize into something which was a bit more feasible, I guess. And you had this idea that when you launched an app, it transformed this multi-tool into a very specialized, specific tool that did one specialist thing really well, get rid of all the clutter. You're not lost in windows, you're not lost in menus, you don't have to right click, left click, scroll up, and you just did your thing. A good app just gave you the one task and you did it really well. And in that sense, at that time, 15 years ago, the iPad embodied a vision of what the computing of the future could be, at least. Maybe it certainly seems to embody Apple's vision for it. Let's fast forward 15 years, and they've basically just given us the Mac back. It's just like, well, we've given up on that concept. This whole kind of one all does one thing, does it really well, focus on the one task, get rid of all the distraction noise, focus in on the one thing, and now we're just going to give you a different form factor of a Mac, and it feels like another misstep. It feels like a missed opportunity, really, in that the iPad landed as something which took us into the future and showed us what the future could have looked like. And you would have thought, in a world of AI, and we're thinking about agents, agentic workflows, we're thinking about products where the UI disappears. They should no longer be about making you work faster. They should be making you not work at all. It should disappear and do it for you. And yet they've decided that actually we quite like the device. Touchscreens are quite cool. We're going to make them closer to the old model rather than try and do maybe what they would have done before and use it as an opportunity to advance into a new future. I just thought it was a really strange, historically Apple move, but maybe it's more akin to the kind of the culture that's emerging now. I don't know.
I'm not so sure. The feedback that I've heard on iPad OS from I guess they're predominantly technical people, but I think it's been welcomed, like because they've been introducing this multitasking thing for a while with every kind of subsequent release of iPad OS, but it's never been that good. And this release does seem to have nailed it for people that want a device that can be used more like a computer. Now, yes, that's quite far away from where iPad started, but we're quite far away from where technology has gone over the last 15 years, and the technical competency of everybody. At the time of the iPhone, I guess it was great because it had one button and you could never get stuck because you just pressed that button and it got back to the home screen, right? And that meant that your grandparents could use it and your 1-year-old could use it. But the grandparents now are all tech savvy, right? They've all come on that journey. Technologically, I think we're all just a lot more mature and we expect certain things. And there's always this debate about what was the correct way to go. Do you want a touchscreen laptop or do you want a single app tablet experience? And are those things mutually exclusive? And of course, we saw Microsoft rather try and fail with their initial tablet interface. We saw Apple talking about trucks and toasters to try and make the argument that the iPad as a predominantly kind of browsing, shopping, reading, artistic device was the market segment it was going for. But then 15 years later, everyone's got an iPad. Everyone's got a tablet, and everyone's got multiple devices. They've got a phone, they've got a tablet, they've got a computer. So I think the expectation has changed. I think where Apple is good is understanding that a technical journey to take people or a generation of people on a technical journey takes time. And they're very good at putting the right thing out at the right time and not getting caught up in all the buzz. I think they're probably quite relaxed about this whole AI thing, actually, and the fact it's not quite hit the market yet. But if you look at Microsoft, they're the complete opposite. Microsoft were the first to market with the tablet computer.
Mhm.
They did it 10 years before Apple did, and Apple had one failed attempt too. I think the Apple Newton was kind of a failed attempt, but they just got the timing right. I don't think the iPad would have succeeded had not the iPhone first succeeded, and then the netbooks kind of fail. And if you listen to Steve Jobs talking about this whole thing, I think it was the iPad was going to be the first thing. They wanted to release that first. Do you remember?
Yeah.
And then they got it working on a phone, and he said, "Oh no, we got to do this." And they focused all of their energy on trying to get that phone out first. So they're quite good at picking the right time to release something. Now, it doesn't always work out. I mean, what's happened to the Vision Pro? I don't know.
Well, I guess I don't know. I mean, I'm not. Yeah, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that it's not a better operating system, and maybe it's not a better iPad, and it's a good alternative to a Mac, and it might cannibalize the casual Mac user. But it's not. They don't have that device anymore, unless it is the Vision Pro. You know what I mean? Like they don't have that device which is showing us what the future should be, which is really what screen tablet done properly was all about. Now, if they put all their eggs in the Vision Pro basket and that's what the future should be, they've probably messed that up, right? And I guess maybe that's what I was feeling. That it feels like they've accepted that the iPad is going to just become a computer with a touch screen, but they don't have something which is also forward looking.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult because I think the Vision Pro probably is forward looking. I think it's their next Apple Newton. It's not. I mean, what they did with the Vision Pro was they made something for the first time, I think, where VR didn't suck. Like the image is crystal clear. They managed to overcome the burnt retina, blurry, not quite ready thing. The trouble is you still have to strap it onto your head and you look like an idiot. That was, if you believe the hype, that was never the vision. But you've got to start somewhere, right? What they need is that technology to shrink down into a pair of glasses, I suppose, like Meta are pushing at the moment. But what it did give them, or what it does give them, is a way to reimagine what that interaction model looks like when you're not just staring down at a screen and touching a touch screen. And if you believe some of the rhetoric coming out of WWDC, that's what was behind this whole liquid glass metamorphosis of their iPhone and iPad, or in fact across the whole ecosystem, their UI layer.
Yeah, I mean they've got a history of doing that, haven't they? I mean, I think probably the primary reason they stopped doing the on-stage keynotes and started putting that artificial background behind them is to make it look more like it does when you're using a Vision Pro. Is to try and normalize that experience. I think they're quite open about the kind of the subtleties of the way they present that, try and normalize that. Yeah, I mean, I think what Apple did with the touchscreen, the iOS type stuff, was they changed the way we interacted with the tech. They enforced a new design language on us. They enforced a new interaction language with us, and they kind of done a bit of that with the Vision Pro, although it's still fundamentally a screen, right? It's just a screen in a slightly different place. And I think that leaves the emphasis in this agentic world on the developers, doesn't it? On the products, on the guys that own the products. If we're moving towards an agentic product layer where the job isn't just to make a workflow easier and have less friction, but the job is to remove the work, understand the intent and remove the work. That is still very much focused on the product owner, the product manager, the product developer, who is going to be delivering products which are still going to be primarily screen based, at least for the foreseeable future. And I think someone is going to make that leap, I think, to try and enforce it from a hardware or an ecosystem layer that says, actually, no, we need to understand intent, and the work's going to happen behind the scenes, and that's going to happen primarily off screen. And I just wondered if this was an opportunity for Apple to start engaging with that and instead to say they kind of just look back to making a slightly different PC. No, maybe that's kind of where Johnny and Sam are going with their potential big release that's coming next year. But this idea that's screenless, it's in the background, it's somewhere else that the work is being done, rather than the user having to do it via some kind of screen.
What do you make of the whole liquid glass thing then, as their big reveal?
Yeah, I mean, it was fine. Does it matter? Yeah, it was underwhelming. I mean, maybe that was partly because it was leaked, but I mean, some UX people love it because it's quite clever in the way that it works with the form factors and across the ecosystem. Lots of UX people that I know hate it because of the accessibility issues potentially, particularly in the current kind of way of thinking about how products work. So it's going to be more difficult to make things readable, for example, and people with various accessibility needs may struggle, particularly in the early days, until it learns to adapt. But, I mean, it was fine. It was just an evolution of stuff, really. I didn't feel those days where Apple shocked us is gone, right? They're just not that company anymore. They incrementally, slowly improve and grow and change and make money.
Some commentators are perhaps generously suggesting that this whole liquid glass UI is to try and prepare us for a future where, we're not expecting pixels on screen, but we're expecting layers of context over reality. So to try and blur the line between looking at your iPhone and looking through a Vision Pro. I don't know if that's being overly generous or if that's really in their thinking.
I could believe that. I mean, I say, I think they're quite good still at that level of subtlety. And so that whole idea of the presentations being done in front of a virtual background, I don't think that's about saving money on whether they're going to book a theatre or get people along to an event. I think that's very much about starting to shift our reality and our expectations around how those interactions should work. And if you say you put Vision Pro on, you can go and get those kind of experiences as you look through the windows and you do whatever else, that kind of multi-layered augmented reality, mixed reality type experience. So I could well believe that, but it's a bit meh. It's just
And
a bit underwhelming.
A striking resemblance to Windows Vista, doesn't it? Like
It
all those
did
years
look-
ago, remember the one that Aero Glass thing? And it's
I
like,
know.
oh yeah, well, they've done liquid glass. Like, yeah, but Windows did that. Maybe Microsoft again were just ahead of their time, and Apple have perfected it now, and now glass interfaces are the way forward, and we're going to see everyone copy that. I don't know.
Maybe.
I thought it was a really interesting juxtaposition, though, where everybody is talking about voice UX and moving away from screens and all this kind of stuff. And then Apple's big reveal was, we've done a new screen thing. It's like, okay.
And maybe they are just calling us all out on it all being nonsense. Don't worry, we're still going to have screens forever, and nothing's really going to change once this bubble's popped, right? Maybe that's what they're doing. I don't know. It just feels like they're a step behind. It feels like they should have released that 2 years ago. Do you know what I mean? It just feels like for the first time they're a step behind. And maybe I'm not giving them enough credit. They've been very good at this for a very long time, but it feels like they're a step.
Yeah. Well, still got to do something with all that cash sitting in their bank, haven't they?
Well, exactly. Can't spend it. I mean, the voice UX thing is interesting. And again, it's kind of related to that kind of work being done for you, isn't it? I mean, they had opportunities to even push that out. And maybe it's tied into the Apple Intelligence piece, but we don't have a new home hub, for example. Siri still is rubbish. And you haven't reinvented that voice assistant. Then you would have thought, actually, there's plenty of Apple fanboys who've got those home hubs all over their homes. In Marby, I've got 2 or 3 in my house. If they could just update the software on that and give that experience, then actually a lot of the competition goes away, doesn't it?
I've got these little HomePod minis everywhere, and I really want to upgrade a couple of them to the Maxi version, but I can't because I know that if they released an updated Siri, that it's not going to work on that hardware. So. Well, there's no point getting them right now, is there?
Or maybe, I don't know. It didn't release one, did they?
So what else is new this week?
Did see Europe did something quite interesting.
Europe did something. That's good, isn't it? It's
Europe,
not just
as a continent. It did an interesting thing. So we saw, obviously, the way was led with the LLM world and the AI world with OpenAI. We saw China get involved with their various models that they acquired one way or another, hook or by crook, depending on which story you believe. But Europe has been lagging behind. Europe didn't have its own thing, and obviously with the various trade wars going on and tech taxes and all the rest of it, it was a certain amount of uncertainty around what Europe's tech landscape was going to look like, as we're so dependent on the American tech giants and so scared of the Chinese ones. So Euro is a company called Mistral, and I guess it's got a French twang to it that I can't quite bring to the fore, but Mistral, they released their first model called Magistral. Again, I think it's got a twang to it that I can't quite pull off. So this is the EU's first AI reasoning model, but what I read about it was it's got a very European flavour to it, a very European slant. And I don't know whether it's going to have any impact on how it operates or not, but interested in your view. So it's multilingual by default, and apparently its multilinguality is that a word? I made that word up, didn't I? I'm going to say it
That's a
again.
good word. I like it. Go with it.
Multilinguality is a central feature. Obviously, there's many languages in Europe, and rather than just being taken the English by default and then translating that English kind of, pseudo translate, they've actually done it properly with native speakers from all the European languages. So that's kind of interesting in terms of that multilingual translation flexibility piece. But it's very much focused on sectors and use cases where compliance requirements are high. So they're billing as great for legal, great for finance, great for healthcare, great for government use. All those kind of spaces where you need to be able to put audits in place, trace what's going on, to the point where you can put a full trace on all of the reasoning that the model's doing behind the scenes, and you have that come out.
It's very European. It's sounding very European,
right? Yeah. So, and then, they're pitching at this kind of auditability, the high stakes environments, I suppose, very domain specialized AI, but very particularly around mission critical stuff where there's lots of red tape and rules and hoops to jump through. It's French, right? It's French. Yeah. Did you hear anything about it?
I'd heard about Mistral, and it's one of these models that I wanted to try and never got around to. So I guess they've released models before. This, from what you're saying, it sounds like this is the first thinking, reasoning, whatever model. Yeah. And what did you call it? Macronist or something?
That's a better name. Macronist. Magistral. Sounds a bit like magistrate, doesn't it? Magistral.
Yeah, it does.
Magistrate. I don't know. I'm probably butchering it. It's probably not how you say it at all, but that's
yeah. So I guess is it important? Is it going to put us on the world stage?
It's a safety net, isn't it? So what happens, right, if we can no longer access the American models and we're all still too scared to use the Chinese? I guess.
Well, there's this massive open source community where you can download all the models for free. So start there.
So is it maybe it is a case that it's just very specialist, and if you've got something where you need high auditability and you need to be able to trace that stuff and that matters, there's value in it?
Yeah, I think that it's a broader question, actually, isn't it? Because it's not. I don't think we need to be worried about us not being allowed to access models anymore. I think that's going open source, and anybody could spin up an environment. You pay enough money to host these models, you can host them locally, and we kind of forget that because we spend so much time not doing that and just going straight to a provider. They make it much easier for us. You put down some money to give us access to this interface, and we can hook it up to all our stuff. But what they're all doing at the moment is they're all building moats, because it's not about the model anymore. It's about how do we create stuff for the user that makes them sticky, and then how do we start making money after a while. That's the convergence, I think, between all the stuff that happened prior to 2022, where all these models were popping up and nobody was talking about them, and stuff that's happening now where models themselves are, not really what it's about. There are companies out there like Mistral and OpenAI and Google, Alibaba, that are making these great models, but that's not good enough in and of itself. That research that they're pouring into doing that needs to be monetized through providing more than just a model. They need that sticky layer. I came across this great word this week called enshittification. Have you heard of that?
No. Do say that again.
N-E-N, enshittification.
Okay, yeah.
And it's kind of what's happening right now with LLMs. And it's probably what happened with Apple. And it's what happens with most technical waves. Your product comes to market and it's very, very focused on the user and delighting the user, and it's all VC funded, and they basically give it away for free to drive adoption, and people love the products, and the user base grows, and then they go either because they need more funding or they go public or whatever. There's a point at which it stops being about delighting users and it starts being about delighting shareholders. And so you see this enshittification of something that was good.
Yeah.
And it gradually just becomes worse and worse and worse. The payment gets ratcheted up, the features get down. They segregate it so that you can only get these features if you're kind of this tier user and these features if this tier user. They basically make it really frustrating for the average Joe to circumnavigate all this stuff. And this is exactly what happened with Slack. It used to be a single-minded tool that did something really well, and now it's really bloated and overcomplicated. And it's what happened with the Microsoft Office suite. It's what's happening. We think that's is what might be about to happen with LMs.
That's the reason, I guess, we're seeing increasingly the AI for this and the AI for that, right? It's the people are trying to create these very specific wrappers on, effectively just wrappers on LLMs, but finding a moat in which to hide behind so they got someone to sell it to. If you could sell the AI for estate agents or the AI for governments or the AI for fintech or whatever, you've got an audience and you've got a reason for those people to come hunting for you. It kind of makes sense. I guess there would have had to be some additional work involved in being able to back up this idea that you could do a full audit trail on the reasoning. I would imagine the thinking out loud that we get from ChatGPT, for example, is probably a cut down version, if not entirely faked, right? So if they're actually genuinely saying that, no, this is fully auditable and this is real to the point where it can be certified and validated.
I mean, that stuff's already important, but it's already out there and available. And certainly in the developer community, there are tools to do reasoning traces. It's maturing rapidly, but it's not mature. There's still too many competing options out there and too much new stuff coming out left, right, and center. So it's very difficult to home in on what you should actually use right now, and I think we're gonna see that starting to settle over the next 12 months as we see a few more winners and losers.
There still seems to be no shortage of money flowing around there. I was thinking actually we should do another rebrand. Did you see the report the other day? I think I don't know if it was Sam Altman directly, but OpenAI said Meta are trying to poach our
Yeah.
employees, and they're offering them signing bonuses of up to $100 million. I know it could be a wild accusation. I don't think they got a quote directly from Meta in response, but there's some money flowing around, right, to get these people.
Yeah. I mean, so if you're listening, I can make myself available.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we are AI experts. We've got a podcast. We can go for.
It's crazy, isn't it? Crazy money. And Sam Altman's move was a little bit cynical, wasn't it? It's basically saying, I mean, he was a bit of a poison pill, I think, leaking that out to the media.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he was definitely not very happy about it. But I saw something else as well, talking about different AI companies and them trying to make money. But someone was making the case that actually the biggest AI company on the planet is not one that we talk about in terms of it being an AI company. And they were suggesting it is Tesla. And the reason they suggested this is obviously they've got the autonomous car thing. So eventually, some point, legislation will allow your Tesla to drive itself. And now I think it's okay to own a Tesla again if you do. I'm not sure. I'm losing track of the cultural relevance. I don't. So I'm safe either way, but it's good to understand which side of the fence to sit on. But they were talking very specifically. This report was talking very specifically about the robotaxi stuff.
Hmm.
I think it's going to be or has been or very soon about to be released in Austin as a thing. Austin, Texas is going to have robotaxis getting rolled out as a mainstream thing, and it's the first step on the road to the driverless car subscription model, where you might own one of cars, but like, I don't know, think Airbnb, right? So you got a spare room in your house, and so you can put that spare room on Airbnb, and someone can come and stay 2 nights a week.
No. These people aren't going to be hiring my car, are they?
They're saying that there is basically a model coming out, a payment model, subscription model coming out, that if you own a Tesla, once it's proven with a robotaxi and people are happy with it, you own a Tesla, you get the app, you put your Tesla on the app, and the user presses the button, and they effectively loan it for you for a couple of hours, and then it drives itself to you, and then you drive itself back.
Wow.
And it's going to blow the market cap of Tesla and any other AI related product. But it's AI that's driving it, right? Because that's what's driving the cars, and they've been building these models for ages, and you kind of wonder the shift into robotics and it moving into hardware, and at the moment we're very much focused on AI being software, but that barrier into hardware it's already happened, and in many ways it happened first, but it's now happening behind the scenes, and that's obviously going to evolve and change, and you kind of wonder if that's actually going to become the real story by stealth. I don't know. But yeah, so the robo-taxi is launching, I believe it's supposed to launch this month in Austin. And you've been
I
able
can
to do...
understand a model. I was going to say, I can understand a model. Somebody owns a fleet of these things, and it just auto drives to the location, picks up the people, and takes them somewhere. The model where, like, me or you own a Tesla, and then we kind of use an app to say, well, no, I'm not using it, it's fair game, and people can jump in it, and it takes them places, and I get paid.
Yeah.
The Airbnb model, right?
Yeah.
That just sounds like an insurance nightmare. How would that work?
It's driving itself. Who cares who's in it?
Right, but well, yeah, I suppose.
Same as a...
That seems weird. Yeah, I guess. And it's funny as well, isn't it? Because when we think of robots, we don't think of cars,
No.
unless you think of Transformers, right? And then you think of cars.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe the first robots that we end up using in our daily lives regularly, AI robots, that is a car.
Oh, maybe. And they're launching the UAV limited trial as well, aren't they? Have you seen this? And this is in the UK. So you're going to be able to get a UAV from, I think, Brighton to Gatwick. They're doing it. And there's some northern one into Manchester as well, where you can
No.
summon a drone and get in it, and it will fly you
I
there.
don't know. I can't. I don't understand it. That doesn't make any sense. Do you know how hard it is to become a pilot? And all of a sudden everyone's going to be like, "Oh, it's fine, don't need them. I just jump in this unmanned vehicle and let it fly me somewhere." That sounds bonkers.
It's bonkers. Yeah, so that's a very limited trial, and I think obviously our good Prime Minister is accelerating our own version of the robo taxi. I think Greenwich are getting some in very on the peninsula. You'll be able to I don't know what, to the O2 and the station and back. I don't know, it's quite a small area, but I think Greenwich are going to be using them. But yeah, but it's a platform, right? Then it becomes a platform play, and that you can then see how the revenue streams really start to open out, and you've got the great disruptors like an Uber, for example, also are terrified on every level, right? So on one hand, they're making a play for this because they're thinking, well, we're going to have our own robo taxis, so we don't need drivers anymore. But on the other hand, everyone else's car could potentially become the new Uber. So it's like,
Uber gets Uberized.
Uber gets Uberized. I know, yeah. So their whole premise of this thing I was reading was that Tesla are actually the biggest AI company in the world. They've been developing it for the longest in a commercial way, and they're the closest to any meaningful revenue and profit. So maybe Elon's on the front foot again.
I think Waymo's still a thing, and so there are competitors, and I don't know how advanced the Tesla is compared to everyone else, but I think what's interesting about Tesla is it never has been a car company. It's always been an AI company, and that's why it's got these sky high valuations, and that's why people don't understand that it's got these sky high valuations, because Tesla is creating AI that understands the world that we live in. So, and that's sitting in its cars, and the more cars out there on the road, the more data is being gathered to improve that AI, and that AI understands human things like road safety and speed limits and and landscapes and geography. And that same AI is going to be used in Optimus. AI is going to be used in Optimus, which is not a car. It's a humanoid robot with the goal of being able to go and work in factories and stuff like that. And if you believe Mr. Musk, jump in one of those SpaceX ships and do some stuff on Mars. So, I mean, and that's going to be Tesla. So Tesla are going to be the company launching robot astronauts into Mars that don't need to worry about feeding themselves on this long journey that's going to take 2 years or whatever it is. So yeah, they're an AI company, and that's ultimately why they've got this ridiculous valuation, I think.
And this is obviously not financial advice, but it's ultimately why they're probably massively undervalued even now, because they become, if they become consumer available platforms, that's when actually they start making real money. You know, it's not fake money off investors; it's real money that's being generated through usage. Really interesting to see how that plays out. Obviously, whether his recent spat with Mr. Trump is going to delay the Austin rollout or not, or whether it's still part of the theatre, I don't know.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because like FANG stocks. So what's that? It was like Facebook, Netflix, Apple, Google. That was what really drove the stock market, or has been driving the stock market for the last 5 years plus, I think, very last decade. But they're not the ones to watch now, right? The FANG is going to disappear, and it's going to be replaced by the likes of OpenAI, Tesla, Nvidia, which are all driving a future which is based on synthetic intelligence and, well, actually synthetic humans as well, right? It's about robots and it's about intelligence.
Yeah, well, I guess it's tentacles into everything, doesn't it? Biotech companies, for example, again, all being accelerated by the application of the capabilities of these LLMs and the AI models. Yeah, there's nowhere to hide.
True, yeah.
Nowhere to hide. This stuff is everywhere. There is a again, if we're going to play the role of the cynic, there is a cynic in me that says that a number of these organisations have started talking more and more about robotics and androids and self-operated vehicles and the rest of it, because the buzz is starting to maybe go out over the capabilities of the LLM. And back to where we started, Apple saying these things they can't really think. Does that mean they've got their own robot car on the way as well? The failed car project is actually going to reemerge.
Yes. What's the narrative that drives the continued investment in the technology? So that was chatbots. It's now agents, and it's just skipping a jump, isn't it? So it'll be robots, I suppose.
I think what's really important is to always be able to see through the hype. I mean, we have a bit of fun with the hype. We quite like the hype. But where it's important is where you can apply it, isn't it? Yeah, where we've seen such a game-changing shift in the capabilities of the tech that as it exists right now, whether it's thinking or whether it's a prediction engine or whatever you want to call it, it is actually empowering our teams and us to do more work more effectively, more efficiently, more accurately, and it's changing the way that people are thinking about what products can be built and how they should be built and what they're going to do or not going to do. So being able to say, yeah, robots are fun and the hype is exciting, but actually there's some real world things that can be played out is kind of where the leadership comes, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I'm still waiting for the robot that can put all my clothes away or do the washing or paint the house or something. Like, I don't care if it can write an essay in 30 seconds. I'd much rather if it could genuinely do something useful.
Well, on that note, I think that's the pod.